The Shadow Nexus still is a fantastic team. If you want to join the Shadow Nexus, you don't need to reject them. They are very welcoming. They are like a teddy bear. You can give them a hug and they will hug you back. That'd be a little
Shadowverse Teddy Bear. That's our new tagline.
Wow, I don't want that at all.
So adorable.
Like a vice grip. Like it's a vice grip. Much better.
Here it is. Crumsion versus Eplicas. Oh, using the Chun-Li leader. Okay. There's that card we talked about. Mars on the draw here. Talk to us a little bit about these opening hands and kind of where is the advantage going to be gained here in the Mulligan Exodium.
Sure. So we actually get to see a very stark difference here. It might not look like much, but the difference between having Staircase early and Quickblader early. Not all the Disaster players are playing Quickblader. And Quickblader is like this kind of like, I want to say wild card. A, because it can get a lot of damage in early. And B, because it's one of the only one play point cards in the entire deck, so you can kind of push an advantage on a turn. It kind of does its Illyrial impression. You do have to use a card for it, but generally speaking, late in the game, Quickblader doesn't really matter. Using it as a removal spell can be really good as a tempo swing.
Yeah. Now, again, PDK getting banned out. No one wants to fight that.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
No one wants to fight that. Now I wanted to bring up a little bit of a factoid about Crumsion. Crumsion actually was the winner of our very first tournament.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah,
I didn't realize it was the very first one. Yeah.
The very first one. He was the very He was the first. He was the winner. So just a little bit of trivia on Crumsion. For those who don't know,
right.
He was the winner of the very first Shadow Nexus tournament.
And I believe it was with his own variation of a Ramp Dragon list.
It was,
and he was playing like Leviathans and some other like sweet tech cards that nobody had ever played, and he just like smashed everybody with it. I remember that.
Yeah, it was that and Wolf Bolt. Yeah,
That's right, Wolf Bolt. That's right.
Why don't I remember that?
Hey man, you know what?
It's
never bad to have a good mind. You know what I mean?
That's
good
true.
memory.
All
so
right.
we do see Crumsion missing turn 4, which is not great, but he has plenty of options for 5.
No, he's got Roundtable Assembly. He's got Council of Card Knights. I mean, he's good, man.
He's got all of the options, and he has a Staircase about to pop pretty soon here. So definitely not in bad shape. And against Midsword, you really do have some time in the mid game to like just not do something, right? Like, it's not that impactful because all of the really big stuff starts happening turn 5 plus. So
one of the things I like about the Midsword matchup is that the most important thing about it is the trading. You know, because in that matchup you don't have big board clears. You don't have, even 2-for-1s for the most part. You don't have that. Unless for some reason you happen to be teching stuff like Maisie. But for the most part, you don't have that. And I think it's actually really cool to see that we're going to see this type of gameplay take place. Where it's like, okay, we're trading, we're really fighting for the board. I think that's awesome.
I actually find this play really interesting. So Eplicas could have gone for white Paladin value there. Probably one of the best turns to get white Paladin value. And opts to go for his Council as an answer to the Council on Crumsion's side, which I find just a little bit interesting because he kind of loses some value here in losing the 1/3 ward to the Bane, as opposed to just losing a random 1/1 ward that you don't really care about. So I think that's an interesting choice.
Yeah, the thing about white Paladin is oftentimes in my experience, unless I'm playing against a deck that is like super aggressive, I just don't play it. Like there are just better things to play on the turn that you would, or like on a 3. You don't ever want to play it on 3 unless you just have nothing better to do. And but in the situation you were just talking about, I feel like white Paladin may have been a little better, but we don't know what his mindset was and why he didn't play it.
Right. It's just interesting. A card that you're probably not going to get much value out of in the course of this game. Obviously, there will be another Council, perhaps from Crumsion or something like that, so you could get use out of it. But I feel like the early turns are the best way to leverage it because late game, there's just a lot more things you can do. And actually, as a mistake, Crumsion's also playing Quickblader. So actually, they're kind of like on the same train. I didn't realize I missed the Quickblader and the Crumsion side of things.
Well, yeah, because it's Taji.
Taji, yeah, it's hard, yeah.
Yeah. I want to say that one card that we haven't seen, and it's something we usually see at Midsword, but it's not something we're seeing right now, and haven't seen in the last couple of Midsword matches, Luminous Mage.
That's true.
Haven't seen it.
Luminous Mage used to be a mainstay, but now we have so many good 5 options in the sword. For sword now, we have Council of Card Knights, we have Roundtable Assembly, we have Albert. There's just too much good stuff there.
Yeah, too many good cards.
Yeah.
Too many good cards. Sword is just stacked with good cards.
Yes, it is. And that's why you see really prevalent aggro decks. Now we're seeing a mid-range deck kind of kick all of these players into top 4, which is absolutely incredible. If you guys were looking for a meta-breaking deck, maybe a deck that can beat those aggro swords that you were really, really having trouble against, maybe even aggro blood and all that stuff, maybe not PDK. That's why they're banning out PDK. But this might be a good deck to look into.
Now remember that this is for the tournament environment. Because you try to do this on ladder, you're going to get rolled by PDK.
If you do play against a bunch of PDK, it can feel bad. But if you know, you're really just hating your opponent roundtable assembling into Julietting you, and then you're just losing all the time, this is probably a good deck against that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because like we talked about in the previous weeks, right? Like it's a strategy, right? You either have to ban PDK or ban aggro sword at the moment. And they're choosing to play PDK and ban it, and then instead of having aggro sword as a second deck, they have mid sword to counter the sword. So like this is all a part of their strategy to just beat what they think the tournament meta is going to be. And they did really well at it this week.
Yeah, you see how many of them are like littering the bracket? Like it just
and
came
like
in
I
full
said,
force, man.
like I said, they even had to team kill on the way to the top 4, like in the last round. So like regardless of who won those matches, there would have been a ton of disaster players.
Yes, which honestly I think is really cool to see that these guys really took it seriously. They put in their work. They did their testing. They did their complaining. I'm sure there was complaining, you know, and that, you know, the complaining led to a great result. And right now, these guys are doing so well. So shout outs to you guys, as Astra, for showing the people the way to go when you know they're kind of stuck in a bind.
Okay, so here's something that I didn't previously think about because they're all new interactions, but Mars plus saving the White Paladin for a Mars kicker essentially just gives you more stats on board. So that might have been a good move then. Just waiting for that second round in order to do it.
Tons of stats. Tons and tons of stats. So, now, I know you're not much of a sword player. I mean, I know you've played it a little bit, but...
Right.
You know, you're not too much of a sword player. But now let's talk about an archetype that generally never gets played right quick before you know something happens here. Control sword. All right.
Yeah.
Now let's ask this: what type of card would be needed to make that deck viable?
There needs to be a bigger bridge. So you're talking about like old school with like Bahamut's and Odin's and, you know, like the supremely top heavy sword decks.
Oh, that's what it was. Yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah. Honestly, what it needs is a bridge. So Dragon can do it because it has ramp, right? Sword can kind of do an impression, but it doesn't have a lot of stop gaps on the way up to 10 play points, right? Like you have Fangblade Slayer, you have Albert and all those things, which are great on offense, but not really great on defense. There's not good ways to board clear turn after turn. There's not really good ways to gain life. So honestly, the best card they could get is Sybil. But that's not going to happen.
Please
but
no.
Like, honestly, something very similar to Sybil in style and effect of being able to either ramp you or gain you health while being defensive or something like that. They just need some kind of a bridge to get to the late game. Because at the moment, I don't think that Control Sword will ever come back. I don't think it's necessary because of how good its mid game has gotten. And they drastically have to change how Sword plays out for that to change, I believe.
That was fun for
That's fair. That's fair. Now, to explain what just happened there for the people who may not know, the Kahulin or Lancer in this particular case did have Bane, so it did trade into the Fangblade Slayer. Now, it didn't take damage, but Bane still triggers. So as long as combat took place between the followers, it still happened. So that's why they both died.
Bane very much a real thing in this matchup that you have to watch out for, specifically because Albert, and this doesn't happen often, but we've seen it on stream before, where you have your enhanced Albert that doesn't take any damage. If you run it into a Bane follower, it will just die. Don't do this.
Yep.
Don't do this, guys.
Yeah. Seen it too many times. Too many times. Like, hey, I got Albert. I'm good. Run into a Bane follower. Hey, why my Albert die? You know,
where'd it go?
Too many times, man. Too many times.
And that can come into play if, like, you're really behind and you need to clean up a Council of Card Knights or something like that. You might want to find a better option than jamming your Albert into that 1-3 with Bane. But you might not have it at that point, so kind of moot. But very interesting interaction with Bane.
Now, I actually like this over playing the Albert. He fills the board up. He knows his opponent's out of Evo points, so outside of having, say, multiple Genos, he's not going to be able to clear a good bit of this board. Actually, he's not going to be able to do that at all because you can't play multiple Genos in a turn. So, well, you can if you have 10 play points. You can't
right, if you have 10.
9. Yeah. Bladed Hedgehog is showing its value. Okay.
Yeah. Even if the board gets cleared here, the damage is still going to stick. So this is pretty much a do or die here for Eplicas. And as we see, he doesn't really have a lot of good options here. Even if he fishes with the Lux, the best he can really hope for is an Albert to actually play this turn. Okay, or White Paladin. Yep, that one works too. That's a ward.
That is a ward, but he's got Front Guard General sitting in hand, which means it's not on the board, which means...
Bad thing. Pain and more pain. But White Paladin was a good pickup. So White Paladin being able to be played and obviously offers some defense without any Evo points. But as we know, there is an Albert in hand. There's even Council of Card Knights and Taji there sitting just to get extra value to help clean up the board and pump those Bladed Hedgehogs up to a crazy amount.
Now, let's talk about, in this expansion, one mechanic, and we were actually just talking about it a little bit, but Bane. How great Bane has become. Okay, like we didn't see a lot of Bane before. I mean, we saw it on like maybe Righteous Devil. We saw it on Fang.
Real quick, Aya. We'll get right back to that. Quick Blader also with Mars turns into a 2/2 for 1 play point.
Yeah. Insane.
So insane value. And Crumsion taking this game away.
A dead Eplicas. I'm sorry, man.
Yes.
But
also with Mars, look at how big this Albert gets after a few attacks. Or I'm sorry, if it would.
Bladed Hedgehogs.
It would get bigger, yeah. Bladed Hedgehogs, just everything just so much bigger. Mars is incredible. Play Mars if you're playing mid-sword. Maybe even, I don't know. Mars has a big application. You could probably do a lot with that card that we haven't explored yet. All right, so sorry, what were you getting into?
I was saying that how much Bane has become, almost a staple to the game now. It's not something we saw a lot of, but now we have Council of Card Knights. We got the Kahulin/Lancer. We've got the new
Scorpius.
Blood. Scorpius. We got the other one, the Ward that has Bane as well. The 4-drop. Was it Uriel? So there's a lot of Bane, and I think it's pretty sweet to see Bane.
People aren't really utilizing it as much as I think they could at the moment. And I don't think that Bane's going anywhere. I assume they will keep printing cards with Bane. You can't make them too powerful because that effect is really good. Sword has the majority of the good ones, right? You got Fangblade Slayer and the 2 that you mentioned. But let's hop into this game. So we're neutral forest versus mid sword. Who do you think has the edge in this matchup?
I think this comes down, honestly, to if Crumsion can actually nail the Beauty and the Beast on a semi-empty board, because we know that Genos have Rush. And we know that Eplicas does have a fair amount of things that have Rush. So those using the Rush followers along with being able to Evo with things that are on board already, or whatever the case is, could actually give him a little bit more, stretch against Beauty and the Beast. So it like, unlike most classes, when Beauty and the Beast comes down, you're just like, well, I can't deal with it. Sword actually can trade into Beauty and the Beast. Yeah.
Because as we see, Sword plays mostly followers, and that's how you kill Beauty and the Beast, not with your spells.
Right.
So
Right.
definitely has a lot of the tools to be able to do that, Geno being one of the best ones, because you can use your Evo point on something else while that already has Rush to kind of just jam for a bunch of damage into Beauty and the Beast.
There's also one other thing, one other facet of this matchup, and it's that since Sword can play so many followers, it makes it much harder to play Beauty and the Beast, because they're far more likely to just, clear your board, force you to have to play more cards, clear your board, force you to have to play more cards, and then that means you won't have the cards you need to play them.
So here's a question for you. There was an opportunity there for Eplicas to actually Evo the Mars to protect it against the Pure-Hearted Singer, just to present a card that your opponent probably has to Evo into. I don't know if I like just sitting there with not using the Evolution Orb and just giving your opponent some advantage this turn.
I think it may have been a little greedy, but if we've looked at how the play has been going on from the last game, Eplicas has shown that he's willing to be very stingy with his Evos. So he's like, I'm only gonna Evo when I have to. Only when I have to. Not any sooner than that. So I do understand what you're saying, but his play style at this point is kind of stingy. Well, like, no, mine. I get all the Evos. They're mine. So
It is interesting. And I believe this play is a little interesting too. Not playing the Lyriel, I guess holding it for the Beauty and the Beast so that it can potentially get some sort of protection here.
Now, I find it a little odd that he wouldn't want to try and set up the Beauty and the Beast, but this does allow him to clear board, which is very good against Sword. Keeping their boards clear, forcing them to have to play more followers, stuff like that. It's very good against Sword because he doesn't have board wipes in his list that we can.
It just feels like he's playing a little bit more for the late game, of course, with that. Not putting the Lyriel into play, not holding more of the cards to set up for, the full effect of Beauty and the Beast. So yeah, just kind of like a middle ground here. Like, I kind of want to play defensive here because I don't want to lose board control, but I also want to set up for this Beauty and the Beast because it's probably my best chance to win now, especially now that I have Area. So, yeah. Interesting side of events from Crumsy in that last turn. There was a lot of decisions that could have been made, and we saw a very middling one there.
Well, these guys are certainly taking their time with their decisions. They're like,
yes.
You know what, man? I can see into your brain, bro. I can see. I know what you got, man.
They're on the sheepy plan, right? Like, take your time, think about all your turns. He probably had a talk with them after the interview yesterday, or not the interview, but just him being on the show. And he was just like, guys, take your time. Take your time. Yeah. It's okay. You don't have to play fast.
This is prime Lyriel, okay? Prime Lyriel.
Lyriel doesn't do anything. What are you talking about?
Prime Lyriel right here, okay? Prime. Absolutely juicy Lyriel. I mean, he could play the Hector if he really wanted, but Lyriel.
Could play Hector. Yeah.
I think Lyriel's better. Now, if he wants to preserve the Evo, he could play Hector. Huh?
Right. Hector will always get value in the late game, whereas Lyriel won't. And if you don't use your Evo here, I don't know. You're just. I guess it's not that big of a deal not using an Evo. Like, using the Hector to kill the 4/1's nice. But I kind of like saving the 3 damage for face. But then again, with Beauty and the Beast, you might not need the extra 3 damage when you already have Area access. So it's very big give and take here, and I think that's what he's deciding on. Can I really afford to give up the 3 damage? Do I really want to use my Evo point here? I think you almost definitely want to get that Mars off the table. The longer Mars sits in play, the scarier and scarier.
Way more value. Yeah, it's super scary. Mars is the epitome of something we were talking about before. Synergy. Mars says, look, all Swordcraft followers, follow me. I got you covered. All right. And like, even this is great value. Just this trade, they get the clash effect of buffing the card, making it even harder. Making it easier for your opponent to kill, harder for you to trade. Like, I love that. That Mars is such a cool card. I'm glad to see it getting played.
I really like. I didn't even notice the interaction between Quickblader. Like, a lot of the mid-sword lists were cutting it because Quickblader is not like a huge value card or anything like that. But if you're playing 3 Mars in your deck, Quickblader becomes pretty prime removal. It becomes a whole sold swing that only costs 1. It's pretty good. That's pretty good.
That is really good. Yeah. Well, we can see that Eplicas can take out Lyriel. He is still sitting on 2 Evos. I don't think that Crumsion's really gonna have much of a chance to play this Beauty and the Beast, unless for some reason, something happens and there's an open slot. I just don't see it right now.
Right, and Staircase isn't popping anytime soon. He hasn't been flooding the board out, anything like that to help it pop faster. Can't really because all the cards in his hand are super expensive and he wants to keep them in his hand. But it's really going to cost him over the course of the next few turns because the longer this game goes, I feel like the better Midsword gets.
Yeah, especially because they have that wonderful thing called Albert.
Yes.
Well,
and as we see, no
Beauty and
pumps.
the Beast is gonna probably die.
Probably. Leaving Beauty and the Beast on the table is never a good idea, especially when you know your opponent's playing areas.
Right, like, pretty sure. Wow. Wow.
Yeah, just gross.
Wow. That is disgusting. I love it. Okay,
Just
love it.
Can even play the Bladed Hedgehog to get value here.
Mars. Oh, Mars. Such a great card.
Yeah, I might have
Such
even,
a-
you know what? No, that's right. We talked about this. Can't leave the Beauty and the Beast in play because of area. So I was like,
Yeah,
maybe
can't
just
do
leave that there, right? No, can't do
Can't
that.
do
No.
that. No, that's
a
crazy.
bad idea. Yeah.
Let's
crazy
not get crazy, X.
talk.
Let's not get crazy. I know you get a little excited over it. Like, hey, man, don't do that. That's not good.
Don't do it. Don't do it. So we get to see Mars actually get to stay in play and then get value off of Gino. And then right after that, get value with Albert, regardless of what Crumsion really does. Like, wards aren't really going to help him here because they're just going to get cleaned up very easily. That Bladed Hedgehog is not going to slow down in damage. Oh my god.
This is, can we say disgusting yet?
Quick Blader.
Quick Blader showing his skills. Let's speed things up and let's take things out because that's what's happening right now. Look
God,
at
this
Mars
is
go.
just so nasty. Now, if you thought that a good inclusion now, even against Midsword now, when they're playing Mars, is, Cassiopeia, Will of the Force, it's going to be really hard to pull those off when you're playing a bunch of followers into Mars.
Oh, and he gets the Beauty and the Beast, but yet again, and he's one turn off of Grimnir. Yet again, this is exactly what I was talking about before. There are just times you can't play the Beauty and the Beast. He's gonna have to play this Hector now to clear his Mars. He can't let it sit there anymore. Can't.
Might even go in with the Grimnir now because he has 2, just so he can stave off as much damage as possible.
Well,
because he knows that Albert's ever present.
Yeah. He can play Hector. Oh, he's on to Unica. Okay. And Illyrio.
Okay.
All right. So that he could have. You're right. He definitely could have just played a Grimnir there to ward up, but oh man, Mars
This
showing.
is so close to game.
Yeah, it is. It's not quite there yet. Not quite.
So I feel Unica is going to be the primary target here. And he knows Grimnir is an option for Crumsion, so he's gotta play somewhat around that, but decides just to go all in with the Albert. Says, you know what? I'm getting that damage in.
Well, the thing is, he can get his damage in. He can even clear the board and have a massive Hedgehog along with this big Albert. You know? And Grimnir doesn't even clear Albert.
No, it does not. So Grimnir doesn't feel very spicy right now.
No, it feels very bland. Very, very bland. And Snap Grimnir, but...
Snap Grimnir just lost in the game. He needed a Hector first.
Yeah. Yeah, he shouldn't have done that. Oh, well.
Ooh. Oh, well. And that will be Eplicas evening up the match.
Yeah.
Great play.
So,
I'm really loving this sword deck. This sword deck is
dude.
so sweet.
Yeah. We were like, oh man, aggro sword, but this is sweet. Like show me this all day. Like I love
fun,
these
interactive, synergy.
Yeah.
It has a lot of play to it, a lot of choices to make on your turns too. A lot of choices to make.
Yeah. It's not just, set it and forget it. It's
right. I play
loving
my 1-drop, I play my 2-drop, I play my 3-drop. Like the end. Like no, you gotta understand what you're doing with this deck.
yeah, these guys they're playing each other very well.
Mhm. Now, this is another matchup where Beauty and the Beast is a big focal point because Shadow, all of its stats are really low until you start getting up to the Thane and the Ektar turns. So if Beauty and the Beast can come out, just a little early, it might be very hard for Eplicas to do anything about it. However, I don't think Force has really good options of board clearing beyond the Elf Twins Assault that we see to really stop a big Ektar push. So I think the early game is super important here. Like, if Eplicas can go wide, if Crumsion can keep it under control, and then whoever is pretty much ahead on board going into the mid to late game probably has a huge edge here.
Well, there is a little bit of a difference between playing Beauty and the Beast when you're going first and when you're playing it when you're going second. There's a very big difference between them. When you're playing it when you're going first, if it's like, well, in this particular matchup, like, well, you're not trading into my stuff, man. You're not trading into my Beauty and the Beast. None of the cards you have can kill it.
Right.
When you're going second, that Ektar could, make that happen.
Yep.
So like I said, there's a little bit of a difference, a little bit.
But I like it. I like the adoption of these slower mid-range decks playing the Staircase just because it gives you a card draw outlet. Like, you don't have to play these suboptimal things to draw cards anymore. And you play a 1-drop that just gets extreme value over time. Now, Neutral Force is kind of weird with Staircase because Neutral Force doesn't really jam a lot of followers into play, right, to make that Staircase go off any earlier. So I feel like it's kind of a little different in that deck versus the Sword deck, where Sword plays tons of followers all the time. That's all it does. So interesting to see it included also in the Neutral Force that Disaster is bringing.
Well, the thing is that you can play, let's say you're playing in a slower matchup, and you get to like 5 and you want to still be able to play the Beauty and the Beast, and you have like a low hand. You can play it right before that. You draw a full hand of cards, and then you can play your Beauty and the Beast on the following turn because you'll have a bunch of cards in hand. So it does give you that ability. And I personally think it's a really good idea in those really slow matchups. Like, this is probably going to be a game that lasts for a while.
Yeah, in the slow matchups, I definitely agree. For the most part, though, you're essentially giving up your turn 5 to make a good Beauty and the Beast turn on turn 6, but by giving up the turn, you might give up the advantage that the Beauty and the Beast has with all of its big stats because your opponent had an extra follower, right, to play, or maybe even group of followers. So
I think that's a little bit more prevalent in, again, I think it's kind of is the going first versus going second thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
That Goblin Mountain Demon draw was great, though.
Yeah.
This is, again, like I said, making a little bit of a difference between going first and going second. If you're going first,
circa 1923, Goblin Mount Demon resurfacing.
Coming back. But you know what?
That's
Goblin
right.
Mountain Demon is quite good right now. Quite good, especially in these mid-range decks, these mid-range matchups. Yeah, it's great against the aggro decks, but it's also good against mid-range.
Yeah, all these. You know what, Disastra? I'm gonna take a little credit. I said play more wards. They were like, you know what? All of our decks, wards. That's
Jam
what we're doing.
all the wards, man. Jam them
all the wards. This is a ward format. If you don't got them, go home and get some. Let's go.
Yep. Hey, borrow some from your friend if you have to. Okay.
That's
Get
right.
some wards in your deck. Okay, get some wards in there.
Go over to your neighbor's house, knock on their door, be like, any wards, please? I kind of ran out over on my house.
That's right. Can I have a couple wards? Let's go.
Cup of sugar, cup of wards, same.
No. Okay, so we see that he's definitely going to take this out. Yeah, he
Zombie
can't.
party it down. It even has the Demon Eater to follow up here to draw more cards. This is a great turn for Eplicas.
Excellent. But this is yet another scenario, yet another one, where you cannot play Beauty and the Beast.
Yep.
You can't play it here. You can't at all. Yeah, this is exactly the problem.
Not only is this board full for Ektar, there are enough shadows for Ektar to get full value if need be. And there are 2 Ektars in the hand for Eplicas, so he is far and away in control of this game at the moment.
Does the word stacked come to mind?
Hands a little stacked.
Yeah, this hand is stacked, okay? It has so many things. It's got the Saber Altar, which is Dark Blade Fiend. So it's got that, which is pretty good. It's a ward. So for those who don't know what that is, it's a ward And at the end of the turn, it uses Necromancy 2, which basically means it consumes 2 shadows to do 2 damage to a random enemy follower. Sweet card.
And it's a 3/5, very big stats, and we talked about it a couple weeks ago. Bigger stats than most of the shadow cards have, of course, other than Ektar.
Well, yeah,
Ektar's
Ektar.
stats are, I mean...
Big Daddy Ektar. Okay. Big Daddy. Yeah, that Staircase of Paradise is going to mean anything.
Yeah, not only that, but like even if there's another ward here, there is another Ektar. Yeah. This is just one of those positions where Crumsion's neutral forest deck did not draw enough of the control that he needed in the early game to actually stop this board control. Like I was saying, if Eplicas had the board control going into those Ektar turns, it's going to be really hard for neutral forest because they don't have a lot of comeback mechanics.
Right. Neutral forest, it has 2 glaring flaws. One, it doesn't have a lot of comeback mechanics, and by that I basically am saying Storm because it has no Storm.
It's not playing the Saha Quill package like it used to
Yeah.
as well. It's not playing like Saha into Lucy or Israfil or anything like that to kind of clean up these big boards. It's not playing Cassiopeia, Will of the Forest, none of these board clear cards. So it's just hoping that its followers are bigger in stats than their opponents more often than not.
Yep. And Crumsion saw the writing on the wall. He's like, okay, you know what, man? It says I'm dead. I can read it. You know, it's in bright lights. You know?
Eplicas taking out Crumsion. I like it. New blood. Let's go.
Yeah, I'm with it, man.
Eplicas moves on to the upper finals. A very well played game. It seems like the neutral forest list had trouble 2 games in a row to really handle what was going on. And that mid-sword list is really, really quite impressive.